Hello and welcome to your first The 42 Rugby Weekly of 2022. Happy New Year to you if it's not too late in the year already to be wishing you such things. And I hope you had an absolutely wonderful break, or as good as possible in the circumstances. Joining us to chat about rugby a little bit is firstly Murray Kinsella of The 42. Murray, we spoke to you just after Christmas, so Happy New Year. Are you a New Year's resolutions man? What's the plan for 2022?
No, I gave them up a few years ago because I just never stuck to them. I'm gonna try and be a better person and stuff. But yeah, had a great New Year. Was down at the Tramore races out near Waterford. Spotted John O'Shea, who's the local major celebrity. Willie Mullins was there as well, and a class day out. So nothing too exciting compared to years gone by, but it was pretty good. How did you get on, Gav?
Poor. Don't really want to talk about it, to be honest. I've been stuck in this house now for what feels like an eternity. But glad to see your faces, all the more glad. And I can't even believe that you're considering being a better person. I just don't see it. Bernard Jackman, how was your Christmas? We haven't spoken to you in a while. You were away, I believe.
Yeah, I was away. Do you not see by my darker shade of white that I'm showing off? I went down to Tenerife for a week. It was lovely. And yeah, back into it. Looking forward to chatting. Obviously, there wasn't many games, but this year this is non-stop talking points in Irish rugby, world rugby. So looking forward to it.
Sorry, Gav, what are your New Year's resolutions?
No, I don't have any. I usually would practice a thing I call wet January, where I go out a little bit more and drink about a normal volume, because I often think, what is the point in depriving yourself of enjoyment on the darkest of months, and especially in a pandemic? But early closing times are going to make that difficult. I like to kind of taper off late January and then make plans for the year, like sometime in Q1, take the pressure off. But those plans are usually at the window by kind of early April. So I'm in a similar boat to you. Are you a resolutions guy, Birch? You don't strike me as one, to be totally honest.
No, I don't. I gotta stop being a hermit. Cut out the sweets, the desserts. No chance. No. Just keep going. Enjoy life.
That is exactly it. That's usually my resolution. Just keep doing what you're doing and see where you end up. We're going to chat about the rugby that was on, obviously, Connacht and Munster, which it probably feels like an eternity ago now, but it has been a while since we actually caught up with you guys at home. It'll be a Munster-dominated show, I'm afraid to say, for those of you from the other provinces. Obviously, we're going to give Connacht their dues in their victory, but just a lot going on with Munster. And for Ulster and Leinster, we're kind of just waiting to see them play again. Now, that feels like a long time since it's happened. We'll dive straight into what happened in Galway, Murray. And from Connacht's point of view, we on this podcast, Connacht fans, everybody involved in Irish rugby has been calling for a long time for Connacht to just actually win games with regularity. And that word consistency has been sort of abused probably at this point where Connacht are concerned. Did it feel as though winning that type of a game, a scrappy old game, they're starting to find what they have been looking for the last couple of seasons under Andy Friend?
Absolutely, and I think it's a great result for them, even given the fact that it obviously wasn't a game of great quality from either side. I'm delighted you kind of started by going to give Connacht their dues, because it has been Munster-dominated week. I got back on Tuesday to work, and it's just been Munster story after Munster story. So it is nice to reflect on a good win for them, a good result. I mean, they'll look at their own performance and they'll see 13 penalties conceded. I think they conceded 13 turnovers as well. While they did show more flourishes than Munster, certainly in attack, they probably were frustrated with their finishing prowess and even a number of chances to score more tries. I know they got one, but they'll feel they could have done even more damage given the number of platforms they had in that regard. So yeah, loads of bits for them to improve on, but at the same time, they've beaten Munster and they've had a good record recently in terms of the Interpro pros, especially with their performance level, and it's good for them to get that result now as well. You think of Thomond Park not that long ago when they had massive frustration about a refereeing decision that kind of helped swing the game in Munster's favour. But I was really encouraged to see probably the more unheralded guys in the Connacht squad really stepping up in this game. Oisin Dowling was excellent in the second row, and we mentioned him a couple of times. It's been a great success. He was injured at the start after moving down from Leinster, but he's been really excellent in the second row since. Obviously, Cian Prendergast continuing his really gritty form, and for a young guy, he's just relishing the combat side of it. Even the handbags, which turned a little bit nastier, I suppose, at half time. even that kind of stuff, like he's not taking a backward step, and he looks like a guy who's built for the big occasion. I thought Matthew Burke, actually a loose head again, a guy who goes completely under the radar. I mean, we spoke about Dennis Buckley getting injured and Connacht's worries at loose head, but he's been really good the last while, stepping up, really winning collisions, being solid at set piece time, and offering a bit around the pitch as well. So fantastic to see that kind of side of the game, side of the squad rather, really kind of stepping up and pushing on through. And it's a really nice way for them to start 2022. And as you said, they want to string these results together now, and it looks like they're going to be able to do that a lot more. Even the way they went away to Leicester and delivered a really good performance. They didn't get the result there, obviously, but Leicester are one of the most informed teams in the world of rugby at the moment, and they showed that they were more than competitive enough there, probably shaded in the scrum, of course, and that was the deciding of the game. But it is exciting for them now, looking into this year, that all their players individually are getting consistency in their performances, and now they're going to get the results hopefully on the back of that.
Bert, you were in Galway on co-coms, and I'd suggest that you've been in Galway for enough of those games where Munster or one of the other provinces have kind of squeaked a win against Connacht, despite Connacht playing well. And this time, obviously, the result was different. Did it kind of feel different, like a step in the right direction, a concrete step for Connacht, if you like?
Yeah, I was actually talking to an ex-Munster player the other day, and we were reminiscing about a 3-0 defeat. Munster beat Connacht 3-0 that I played in the sports ground. And we actually said, and maybe we were biased because we're on the field, but there was no one going away from that game talking about it being a crap match, because it was a full-blooded affair, and both teams tried to play. Obviously, neither team's attack got on top, but that was the most disappointing thing for me. I was co-com. It was a very difficult game to co-com on, to be honest, probably the most difficult I've done this season. There was a lot of errors. Connacht, particularly in the first half, they put a lot of ball on the ground that they normally don't, but they were trying to play. And in fairness to them, in a third quarter, some of their attack really started to stress Munster more than should have, to be honest, and Munster started to give away penalties at the breakdown. But they were the only team who wanted to play on the night, and the stat that there was 45 passes made by Connacht or by Munster, 22 or 23 of them from 9, Craig Casey. I mean, that tells a story in a game that they had a decent platform off line out, decent platform off scrum. They just seem to be seem to have no interest in playing with the ball in hand. So yeah, it was a strange one, and I think as well, I mean, there was lots of scuffles and pulling and dragging, but I mean, I think Connacht were feeling that they were winning those little battles, and I mean, for you'd expect coming out the second half, given what happened at half time running off the field, given that Connacht had kind of started that, you would expect some kind of reaction from Munster in the second half, and that doesn't have to be a fight. I mean, you can lay down a marker physically through set piece dominance, through physicality at the breakdown, through big hits, but they were found wanting. There was no reaction, and I mean, I think that's the thing they'll be talking about on Monday, how they allowed themselves to be, I suppose, bullied to a certain extent by Connacht, and also how innately negative or cautious they were with their game plan. I mean, Damien Delanday is a world-class player. They're 10-8 down, 4 or 5 minutes left. Ben Healy throws a great pass. Connacht were narrow. That's an opportunity to relieve pressure, and he got as far as the 22. There was definitely an opportunity to at least put a pass in, see what happens, and then maybe kick. But, I mean, he just kicks it out. Like, if you're winning 10-8, you do that, but not losing 10-8. So, for me, that typified, there's loads of other examples of when they kicked the ball away, but that typified how they seemed to be just totally alien to wanting to have the ball in hand. And they got what they deserved. And it was narrow, and they'll say it was a close game, but they got what they deserved on the night, I felt.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Deolande do that, and on the other side of the spectrum in terms of experience, Alex Kinsella at one point doing something similar, and I think we'll get into that a little bit with Munster in a moment, but just to stick with Connacht for the time being, Birch, like, I thought the maul was actually quite interesting. Defensively, it's been a bugbear of theirs for a long time, and Munster have probably punished them off the top of my head a fair few times in recent years. They didn't seem to get really any purchase out of it, or not a lot in Galway, and Connacht, as Murray said, looked probably the more, I don't want to say well-schooled team, it's probably unfair, but it looked as though they were more dangerous with their own offensive maul than Munster were. Is that something that they've improved quite recently, or have I just missed
No.
a kind of a gradual improvement?
No, that's been better since September, to be honest. I mean, it was a massive Achilles heel for them. No matter how good their attacking game was, they were so poor at defending mauls, either conceding tries or conceding penalties, which led to 5 metre lineouts and then conceding yellow cards and tries. So before Christmas there, I saw a stat. They'd only conceded something like five penalties out of 68 maul attempts, and that's been added to now. So if you look at the Munster game, Munster were getting some go forward at the initial start of that maul. But what Connacht are very good at the moment is not conceding a penalty. So they're not afraid to give up a couple of meters. They don't want to give them up, but they would like to contest in the air as well. So against a good mauling team, which Munster are, they can be vulnerable to giving up 4 or 5 meters. But what they're good at then is showing really good pictures to the referee and stopping it and making Munster play off it. And the maul, in fairness, like a good maul is a great attacking platform, even when it's stopped, because obviously the opposition have had to put so many players in to stop it, but only against a team who are willing to actually pull the trigger and get to wit. So if Munster are willing to play narrow off a stop maul, I mean, it's playing into Connacht's hands. So I think Connacht did really well, but that's not new, Gav. That's since September. They've worked really hard on it over the off-season. But what was surprising was how they punished Munster with their own attacking maul. Which is an area they have been really disappointed with in too many games this year. They've gone to the corner and they just haven't nailed that. And the Bundyaki try, I think that could be a massive psychological flip for them, because they knew their maul defensively was going well, but it hasn't been an attacking weapon. They've been relying on other areas of their attack to score points. So if they can add that now, and they will get confidence from that. And in fairness, it's winter rugby. They play in the sports ground. You need to have another weapon. You can't just be all out attack all the time. So I think that's definitely something that they'll be really pleased about. And it's something that maybe every team needs to have some element of balance to their play. And Connacht will always be favoured towards high tempo ball in hand, trying to offload, but there will be games where you need to be able to go to the corner and put a squeeze on team, and they did against Munster.
Yeah, the game seemed to hinge, Murray. Or sorry, you were going to come in there, Murray?
Yeah, you said you didn't want to maybe say that it was well schooled. Is that the phrase used? But like, I think that was a good example of how Connacht did probably look the better coached team overall on the day. Like, Deval Senecal has done a brilliant job with those forwards. As Bert says, the mold's been transformed, really. It was maybe a strong word, but really improved. Obviously, Peter Wilkins has taken over the attack, and it wasn't a perfect night for that, but I still think we saw lovely glimpses of what they've brought in on that side of the game. Like, they've slightly tweaked their game style. It suits Jack Carty so well. In their face play, he's got really tight runners, like quite narrow off him, and you generally think get those forward pods a little bit wider out will spread the defence, but guys are running real tight lines off him, getting nice timing on their acceleration onto the ball, so they're always a threat just off his shoulder. Defenders have to make really late decisions in kind of congested spaces, and a guy like Carty is excellent at making the alternative decision in attack late at the line, either picking out one of those forwards, darting himself, or going out the back door where they always have a back loaded, and then with another wave of at least one forward off him as well. And you think that's actually pretty simple structure, but it's really hard to do it really well with the kind of cohesion that they're getting, and it shows in terms of the quality of coaching that they're getting there. Obviously, Collie Tucker and Mossy Lawler have come in and influence on their sides of the game as well, and Tucker be pleased with the defensive side of it in particular. So yeah, they look well schooled and well coached at the moment. And then there's instances in Munster's game plan where let's acknowledge that the cohesion side of things is really tough at the moment. They've had a really strange period of obviously the COVID, South Africa isolation, guys coming in and out at different times as well. But even at that, there's frustrating moments for them where they don't look like they're all on the same page. Even something early on where Mike Haley runs into one of his forwards on counter attack. There's a bit of rustiness there, of course. But then even you think of that passage where they continually battered away at the Connacht try line before half time, where they kept going for the tap penalties, and the phase where they get turned over, you've got Jean Klein running around the corner. The other two players who might be in his kind of forward pod, one of them ends up standing behind the ruck, the other runs short off the left hand side of the ruck, and then they pass back to the left to Jack O'Donoghue, who's clearly not expecting the ball and it's completely static. He's got Gavin Coombs on his shoulder, one support player, and he seals off the ball because he's under such pressure. And you just think, there's no joined up thinking around what they're doing, even in that aspect of their play, which has been such a strength. So we've got to absolutely acknowledge that there was cohesion elements to it, and there's a rustiness there, and it's been a really tough period. And it was interesting that Mike Haley spoke about it this week, just in terms of how difficult it actually is to come out of 20 days isolation, first get up to speed physically so you don't get injured in training, and then try and pick up your kind of game sense and the skills under pressure. But at the same time, Munster made loads of decisions and choices that just weren't joined up and didn't look like they'd been well schooled in a plan that they were going to execute.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to say that Connacht were better schooled in the Maul specifically necessarily, because it is just one game, right? Yeah. And we've seen Munster being better in the Maul than Connacht over a longer period of time. But if you zoom out, probably in the last 4 games off the top of my head between these two provinces, I think Connacht definitely looked like the better coach team overall. And if you look at their squads, the resources at their respective disposals, like, Munster should be beating Connacht well on paper. We know, look, the game isn't played on paper, but just player by player, pound for pound, Munster should be much better than them. And there's been a score between them in every game. Munster have been fortunate in a couple of those games. They've also lost a couple of those games when it's been important. And Birch, it felt like a turning point for Munster's departing coaching staff. And it's a weird sort of a feeling, because I think as much as we balk at the idea of there being like rugby values, I actually do think rugby fans are generally more patient than fans of clubs or teams in other sports when it comes to coaches. And there is a kind of a almost blind loyalty at times towards coaches. But when that loyalty isn't reciprocated by the coaches themselves and they're out the door, then fans start to raise their heads above the parapet a little bit and actually say what they feel. And I'm probably including myself in this a little bit, but it just felt as though a lot of Munster fans kind of don't know how much longer they can take this for. Even though they know there's an end point coming, it actually felt like a breaking point for a lot of them. Just that they've seen this type of performance so many times. And I've no doubt that Johan van Graan and Stephen Larkham don't send Munster out to play negative rugby or conservative rugby or reductive rugby, whatever you want to call it. They probably think it's intelligent rugby, but there's actually no rugby involved in it really, or not much, you know. And if you're losing games while not really playing the sport you're meant to be playing, or not playing it in any meaningful way, really, like, I don't know. There has to be a change. I mean, I think it's safe to say now Munster are probably fortunate that there will be changes at the end of the season.
Yeah, I do agree. Munster fans are incredibly patient and tolerant, but I do think that the reaction to the Connacht game is probably, you know, a step too far for a lot of them. Now, having said that, things can change, but I do think there's massive pressure on Saturday, if that game goes ahead, that there is some kind of reaction, because that'll be cast Connacht Ulster, and I just think confidence level and levels of expectation for the next four or 5 months will drop to a low that could affect, you know, next year and the year after, because people are going to stop. They're going to show their lack of interest through bums on seats, you know, and that'll affect Munster financially. We know that they're rumoured to be in a deficit, and you know, it just becomes. And the problem as well for the current management is how well the team played in Wasps. And I know, I mean, with poor preparation, without those coaches involved, maybe with the naivety of youth, the fact that obviously Wasps weren't up to the level. But if you look at how Munster set about playing the game, they really threw the shackles off and wanted to play. And I think if they had lost that game against Wasps playing the way they played, no one would have had any questions. And I don't think any Munster fan expects it's a God-given right to beat Connacht. But it's the nature of the content is the problem. So I think this is a massive week. I do think I think Munster have been in denial for a long time. And I think that's fed into the fact that they haven't changed the pecking order in Irish rugby. It seems to be that they've accepted, and they'll argue this to the cows come home, particularly, you know, they're very, very sensitive to outside criticism, which they always were, but they used to make sure they had the performances on the field that meant you ate your words. This current crop over the last 7 or 8, 9 years have just become just doing okay. They're just doing okay. You know, they'll get to semi-finals, which what they spend given their heritage is a given. You know, I think that's where they should be at. minimum. And yeah, it just seems to be that there's never really a crisis. There's never really a, this needs to change. It's just tick along, as normal, and everything will be okay. The fans will still support us. We're Munster. Eventually we get it right. And even when Leinster had that dip, when Leo came in first and there was that transition after Matt O'Connor and Joe Schmidt, and there was young players needed to be blooded, and Leinster lost 6 out of 6 in Europe. Actually, they had a really poor year. Munster didn't win a title. Connacht won one. Scarlets won one when others were in position. Munster didn't win a title even when Leinster weren't at their best. So, that's a sign for me that they weren't ready to take that opportunity. So, having said that, they still have huge amount of talent, huge amount of history. They can get it right, but you'd wonder who in there are the senior players strong enough to drive change? Is the CEO and the board of management strong enough to drive change? Is it Leinster driving Munster? Is it the RFU driving Munster? I just think this could be the turning point for them if they get it right. But I don't think it's just coaching. It's across the whole organisation. They're very quick to highlight people criticizing them. But the easy thing to do is just focus on themselves and put in types of performances, win trophies that they're capable of winning.
Leinster were probably real honest at that time as well, Birch, weren't they? Yeah. In terms of it wasn't good enough, we have to change something here. And they went out, including Leo Cullen himself, and fixed it. First it was Graham Henry, and they eventually got Lancaster in and they made changes and probably streamlined even things behind the scenes there to make themselves better. And that honesty is a massive side of it. One of the other things around the style of play, you said earlier on with Connacht, they've got to have balance in terms of the attacking side and the maul. When Munster have these performances, I think they lose all sight of balance in how they approach the game. Yes, on a day like that, absolutely maul and relentless 22 attack are key elements of it. But you can't completely lose sight of other vital aspects of the game, like passing into space, as you mentioned earlier on, in terms of Dialende, when that's on. Or there was an example early in the game, wasn't there, when Ben Healy hangs up a beautiful spiral bomb on a free kick. The ball goes bouncing up into the 22. Jack O'Donoghue gathers it, and they've got an overlap on the left-hand side, and it doesn't seem like anyone's even looking for it. And they almost get too blind when they heavily pursue that kind of attritional style of play that they do excel in so often and that they can overpower a lot of teams with. They just lose all balance. Even if you look at someone like the Springboks, who are kick, maul, scrum heavy, they score absolutely brilliant tries and have brilliant attacking flashes even within that game plan, because their players are still alert and coached to be alert to those possibilities away from those areas of focus. So I do think they have a tendency to go that way. And as you said, Gav, I've actually been really kind of not surprised, but it's been interesting the reaction to this game, and it's always so different. Online reaction is a really bad place, I think, to judge it. Usually it's hysterical on there regardless of what happens, but this time you have fans that are ringing, texting me, getting in touch, people who are in the game as well, and not just on Twitter expressing their opinions, just thinking this is not in a good place at the moment, and even suggesting that maybe Munster would be better off to cut their losses now and move on with some sort of kind of makeshift coaching ticket. I personally don't think that will be the case. I'd be very surprised if Munster do make a move that drastic right now and they'll back the kind of coaching team to improve things. But it is interesting to see that kind of noise and murmurings around Munster, because it feels like people are kind of running out of patience as well. You talked about Connacht's budget, and it feels like they're getting closer to maximising their potential than Munster are with all the resource they've been given. And again, let's not get towards hyperbole here, but there is a little bit of a strange scenario now where you've got a coach who they handed a new 2-year contract to, and then he decided he wants to join the worst team in the Premiership. And obviously there's attractions there and there's loads of different factors, but obviously Munster aren't going to be particularly happy that that's the decision their head coach took after vowing his future to the province. The RFU aren't happy with that. The RFU aren't happy with how Munster is kind of set up behind the scenes. We've heard about the private investment and that element of it. So there's loads going on here, and yeah, Munster are definitely going to be competitive. I would be shocked if they're not in the hunt at the end of the season, but they can be better than this. They can definitely push it onto the next level, and that's probably what's frustrating their supporters at the moment.
Just on the Bat thing, if Bat signed Jenkins and Delande, even though it's a free market, it's a free market. I think that'll be another hammer blow to Johan. And obviously, look, he has to sign the players the reality is for the next 6 months. He's only human. A certain percentage of his week is going to be thinking about, what the makeup of Bath looks like, right? And if Damien Landay and Jason Jenkins can't stay in Munster, it's a free market and they go wherever they want. But I just think that will be another. I think a lot of fans will find it difficult to accept that too. It's just something it's interesting. And it's very unusual for us in Ireland to have this. We had it with Pat Lam, obviously, where, he exercised that clause and he got out. He got out of his contract with 6 months' notice. And now this is the second time that I can remember it in terms of provincial coaches and how that's how they're using that to break a contract and the ramifications it has. I mean, who's doing a recruitment for Munster now? I know they've signed 6 players this week, but it's a bit of a mess, really.
The other interesting thing is, like, Johan van Graan had agreed a new 2-year contract, and I think a lot of people would question why that new 2-year contract was given that Munster haven't got to where they aspire to go. They aspire to be the best club in the world. It's on their website if you want to look for the document. They want to be the very best, and they haven't been the very best. I don't think a lot of people believe they've taken steps towards being that. So he got a new 2-year contract, which I think is a maybe an odd decision in regards of their ambition and where they've gone in the last 4 years. And now they end up with a scenario where he's leaving at the end of the season, and maybe that is going to work out better for Munster because they can move in a new direction now. I thought it was also fascinating to hear Graham Rowntree speak this week. He was really excellent when he was up in front of the media. Spoke about the bond he's got with the province, his family connecting with it, how much he loves it here, how he wanted to sign for 5 years, but they only gave him 2. And he was obviously evasive on the question of ambitions of being a head coach. I don't know what you made of that, Birch, but his words have gone down really well. Yeah,
just on your first point about, I agree. I was surprised that Johan automatically got 2 more years. I also was shocked that he had it because if you remember, there was no announcement. We only found out he'd signed a 2-year contract after he broke it. Which, if you're Johan and you're going, geez, do Munster are they really proud of signing me? Like, so there's loads of mixed messages. It's very rare someone signs a coach and doesn't make any announcement he can hold off for a couple of weeks, but to hold it that long, and that led to all the uncertainty about Stephen Larkham, etc. as well. It all added into it. So I think from that point of view, that there's question marks around that. The second point about Graham Rowntree, I think of Stephen Larkham, of Johan van Graan, and of Graham Rowntree. Graham is probably the most Munster-like coach in terms of his character and personality. Like, he's a warm type person. He buys into things, and that's what Munster have always been about. I think, in some ways, I think that there's been a tendency over the last 10 years to basically try and put some kind of model. The model for a professional rugby team is this. That's what Munster need to do. That's what Leinster need to do. That's what Connacht need to do. That's what Ulster need to do. And it seems to be very IRFU-led, what Munster do, whereas I think the other provinces, it seems that they try and do their own thing to a certain extent, a little bit more, right? And I think Munster's the worst place you can apply high performance model into. I think you need to find people and ways that tap into where they've come from, their own identity, because that's what made them special in the first place. If you think back to why they were really good and won Europe twice, it wasn't because it was the perfect structure. It was the people that made it. It was the people that made it. And I think Graham is someone that the players have bought into. I thought he spoke really well. And yeah, that's what Munster need. They need characters, they need personalities, they need people who either know what Munster rugby's built on or want to find out about it. And yeah, I think his personality highlights maybe where they're lacking in other areas.
Has he done a good enough job as forwards coach, Murray, to earn a new contract?
Sorry, my dog was just after busting into the room there. So
I thought it was a Munster fan.
I don't think
it was
John
the PR office.
John is a leash dog.
Kill the call.
I think he's Leinster. But yeah, like I do think the forwards have been like really solid and reliable, and like we just mentioned, that's the area of the game they so often go to. The maul is so instrumental in many of Munster's wins. The momentum they gain there, the pressure they put on opposition. Obviously, their attack close to try line, where their forwards are used as the primary attacking weapon, is really impressive as well. There have been blips and, I suppose, underperformances at line out time. Even thinking that Connacht game was a bad day for them as well, but that will happen. Reports from the players who work with him are really good in terms of his work on the training ground, and he's hugely liked by the players, and that's an important part of it as well. I do think he's a good forwards coach. It's an interesting one. You know, if someone else comes in as a head coach, you generally get to pick your own coaching ticket, but he will be there if he's remaining in that forwards coach role, and that's an interesting dynamic as well. But I don't think he get much more of a strong CV in terms of a forwards coach, and a guy who's, from all accounts, really easy to work with as well. So it makes sense on that front as well. So yeah, I think that's a good bit of business from Munster in terms of tying him down. There are loads of elements that they have now that they can build off. I even think, say, Ian Costello, someone who's been mentioned as possibly stepping up into the senior coaching ticket, but I think he's just started with that academy job and is doing a really good bit of work there as well, and getting that side of it in order. He's got a really good knowledge of the AIL. He's got a really realistic understanding of what's going on at other levels in the pipeline. We've spoken before about how important it is that they sort out aspects of that, like Limerick and getting more players through on that side of things. So I think letting him to do that work is really important, even though he obviously made an impression with that Wasps week and how well he managed it, how well he spoke even that week, and the kind of atmosphere he built in his squad was probably as important as anything else. And we spoke about how players, you know, including Peter O'Mahony, put that up there as the most enjoyable experience of their career, which is probably quite telling as well. So yeah, I think they've got elements there, but there's a whole lot of the puzzle and the jigsaw still left to figure out, and how it settles, as Birch says, is going to be really important for the future of Munster. You need an element of what has made Munster, but I also think it's really time to start looking forward. I mean, the reference points of those great Munster teams, they're so distant now. You know, the game has changed. The tactical style and trends in the game have changed massively. I think Munster probably need to look forward a little bit more with a kind of fresher attitude around that. Very
obviously. Sorry, absolutely. I'm not saying that you can't have you don't need to have tactical or technical know-how. You need to have a high performance model. Absolutely, but you still have to have an identity that's unique to you. So that's there's no team in the world who's not looking at where they're coming from or what they want to create as part of their whole overall makeup. And I totally agree about you with Cosy. I think, Cosy obviously could be one of the assistant coaches, potentially could be the head coach. But I think that the job he has on his plate and has started will be massively important for the long term. And that's what Munster need. They need people who have a long-term vision for where they're going, a medium term and a short term. And they just need to get it right this time. And absolutely, I hope I didn't come across saying, it's all about looking back. They need to look forward. They need to be tactically smart. They need to be well coached, etc., etc. But also they have a unique history that you'd be foolish to just, brush over.
In that, what I'm interested, Bert, obviously, as far as we know, they've spoken to Declan Kidney, just, initial conversation. What have you made of that link? Because that's obviously a link to the past.
Yeah, it's a link to the past. I think they need somebody who's not on the field. Okay, so the problem is Johan was signed as a head coach to be on the field, and he's drifted away from the field. It's now Steve Larkham is effectively the de facto head coach. Johan is more of a director of rugby, but isn't a proven recruiter or retention guy in terms of really being smart in the market, right? So Steve Diamond, for example, has gone to Worcester as a consultant. Steve Diamond's forte is basically getting a roster together for a certain budget, right? And being smart in the recruitment game. What Munster potentially lack is somebody who understands a Kidney type, and I do think probably having come from Munster is a massive advantage. But what Kidney's done at international level and now is done in the Premiership, he understands player contract values, okay? He understands the recruitment game. He's got a network of agents. He's gone through this, and he's not on the field in London Irish. It's Les Kiss and the coaches who put together a very good game plan. If you watch London Irish, they're probably fighting or batting above their average in terms of how the results, and certainly to play a good brand of rugby. But I think they need that focal point who can report to the CEO. Like if you gave Graham Rowntree the head coach job, it would be madness to have him involved in all the stuff, that isn't involved in head coaching, because effectively what he knows best is the pitch, right? And and it would free up some budget, because you don't need to pay massive money for a classical DOR, who's not hands-on, but who can actually alleviate a lot of the pressure, a lot of the admin, a lot of the hassle, a lot of the bullshit from the head coach. Can report to the RFU, can report to the board, to the professional games board, etc. Can do the media. If the head coach doesn't want to do media that week, can take off the load, can negotiate contracts with players, can talk to agents, etc., etc. So it's not the head coach's fault if a player's not happy with an offer, right? And you have 2 or 3 weeks of that, them stewing over that discontent. The head coach can keep harmony and build a really good culture in the squad, and it would free up budget then for Graham Rowntree, for example. Who I mentioned him because he's in there, he knows the team. It's not a great time to be going looking for coaches. Most good coaches are under contract. Could then build assistant coaches around him, and maybe have a little bit more. But even though we know Munster pay big money to their assistant coaches, but maybe use that budget that you save on not having a really high profile DOR to get in a really good defense coach, or a really good attack coach, a skills coach. I don't believe that. I think they're one of the only teams who don't have a full-time skills coach. And you build a really good coaching team who complement each other, and give the players exactly what they need in terms of technical information. But you have someone above who could be there for 10 years, who is in touch with the academies, in touch with the clubs, in touch with the universities, as I said, and looks after all that other stuff. For me, that's a better setup for Munster than they had it this year with Johan, where he's a DOR, but he, bar signing Snyman, Delande and Jenkins, there's probably no real coup in terms of an under the radar signing, didn't cost a lot of money, that has come in and been really influential, like Mac Hansen in Leinster and Connacht, for example. Andy Friend has done really well. And Andy Friend isn't on the pitch as much as he was. I mean, that's Peter Wilkins now, but Andy Friend works with Willie Rand, Tim Allnut, to make sure all that roster stuff is the best it can be. There's obviously, you don't win them all. You lose Ulton Land, you lose Quinn Rue, but you win enough to keep the roster improving in a healthy way. But also then you're helping the head coach, which in Connacht's point of view is Peter Wilkins, drive the culture, drive the strategy, make sure the identity's right. That seems to be the best model. Leinster have it. Obviously with Leo not having to do Stuart doing most of the coaching, nearly all the coaching, Leo there as driving the culture, the vision, and then Guy used to be doing the contracts. Ulster have it with Bryn Cunningham doing the contract work. Dan is a little bit more hands-on, but their CEO has a proven track record in rugby, so it depends on what you have in your organisation. But I think what Munster are lacking in their organisation above Johan is people who have been at the coalface of professional rugby in some shape or form over the last 5-10 years, and really understand the market and the dynamics. Whereas Leinster have Mick Dawson used to do the contracts. Leinster are very lucky. They've got a lot of really good people in the right places, but there's no reason why Munster can't find those.
What do you make of that, Murray, before we talk about some of the actual recruitment that is going on at the moment at Munster?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's kind of the invisible stuff to us. And what Birch has said, it makes a lot of sense. And that is a massive part of it. Like, we focus on the coaches, but like the people above that in Munster have responsibility for making them the best club in the world, which is their stated aim as well. And the CEO, Ian Flanagan, like, he's got big decisions to make, and he's got an influence to have there. And obviously coming from football, I think his previous gig was in it's a different ball game altogether. There's the professional game board with the likes of Mick O'Driscoll and John Kelly, I think some ex-players involved in that as well, who drive decisions, and it is unseen to us so often, but those things are massive. It needs to feel a little more settled from Munster at that level as well, to to drive things below that as well. And Flanagan, I suppose we haven't heard too much from. Obviously, the CEO is rarely up for interview and that kind of thing. When he was up for interview, we heard about esports and the fact that they were going to sell some naming rights for Thomond Park, which has been ongoing for as long as I can remember at this stage and hasn't happened. And obviously that's a divisive issue, but that kind of stuff as well, it matters in terms of bringing in income. They've had the private investment for Dialande and Snyman. It sounds like that wasn't there this time around, and that was maybe one of the issues, and Johan van Graan wasn't too happy about that side of things. So it has to be tidy and smooth behind the scenes for everything else that we see day to day to run smoothly as well.
Just last thing on this, it's my understanding, and I may be wrong on this, but the IRFU have a big say in the head coach, but Munster have more autonomy for the assistant coaches. So that it's a joint process, I believe. But also just last thing, like Scott Robertson is the one that everyone wants, right? But if you got Scott Robertson in, are you gonna basically clamp him or put pressure on him to do all the other stuff? You know what I mean? You'd want him, setting the vision, motivating the players, creating that identity, culture, etc. But being hands-on with the players. You wouldn't just put Scott Robertson in and go, our rugby's secure for the next 5 or 6 years, because there's so much other things. And I think at the moment, it's not really clear who is driving that in Munster, and something that needs to be looked at, I think.
I think we can accept that Damien Deolande is out the gap, or will be, whether it's Debath or otherwise. Where does Dom Morris fit into Munster's squad next season, Murray? This is a story you had in the 42 last night. He's a 24-year-old. He's Irish qualified. He looks like he's on his way from Saracens. He can play 12, 13 on the wing. But is he more of a kind of a squad player? Like, it doesn't feel as though he's a direct replacement for Deolande. Or is he, if that finance isn't there to bring in a marquee player to replace Deolande?
Yeah, as you say, nothing officially confirmed there yet, but certainly have been talking to him, and he's been a good player with Saracens. Obviously, he's not a kind of high-profile star, but a very effective, powerful, and I know Birch has probably seen more of him player, and he's featured a lot for Saracens. He's over the 40 cap mark now, and you're not a poor player to do that. So he's got quality, certainly. By all sounds, yeah, Dialande is kind of expected to leave now. Haven't heard of any contract signed elsewhere, and you never know, but that is certainly the sense of it at the moment, along with Snyman. So if it is a replacement, it's obviously a without being harsh on people, it's a downgrade, because Damien Dialande is one of the very best centres in the world. There's a bit of chat around Munster going out to sign a marquee name again. Haven't heard any specific names in that. Apparently they tried for Malachi Fekitoa at one stage. He's going to look to France, I think, instead. And they'll obviously try and recruit some stardust if those two South African high profile stars are leaving. But that's probably, again, something that fans need, isn't it? You want a big signing. You don't want your 2 stars World Cup winners leaving and nothing else coming in. So I'd imagine there's a little bit more to do on that front from Munster's point of view, as well as the contracting. Like, good news yesterday with 6 new contracts at senior level. Chris Farrell, Joey Carberry, Jean Klein, 3 of their Ireland internationals among them, as well as some of the younger guys, including Alex Kendellen, stepping up from the academy year 2 to a senior deal, which is fantastic news, and he looks like a great prospect. So again, there's positive bits for Munster to build on in the future, but I do think there'll probably be a little bit more recruitment to come. And as Birch says, the fascinating thing is, like, who's driving that?
Yeah. Just Mars is decent. He's quick and he's strong. He's good defensively. He runs hard. Comes off the bench quite a bit for Saris, but no, he'd be decent signing. Obviously Irish qualified. I think if they are allowed another marquee player, they need a front row, not another centre. They need a front row hooker or a tight head, and go spend your money there. I said it last year when they signed Jenkins. I think still, like, especially the way they want to play, especially the way they are playing, you need to be dominant up front. I mean, the reason it works for the box is they bring on 6 world-class forwards to replace the ones that come off for the last 30 minutes, and they put a squeeze on teams. I mean, their sub-front row is phenomenal. So Munster are trying to play a game that they're better than most packs, but they don't really have the tools to bully the top 5 teams in Europe, I don't think, or maybe the top 2 or 3 teams in the URC either.
If they don't replace Deolande directly with a kind of an elite level player, Murray, though, I'm not sure they have the tools either way, you know? Like, I actually think they need both. And I know it's probably an impossibility, but that's the situation they're in, I think.
It'll be interesting to see what happens in terms of interprovincial movement this year as well. There undoubtedly will be some, and there's undoubtedly interest from Munster in some of Leinster's players. I know Dan Sheehan's been mentioned a couple of times. How amazing would it be for them to get him? And obviously he'd play in every game. Kieran Frawley's another one that I know other people are looking enviously at, a guy who isn't first choice when Leinster have all their players available, but who very much looks like someone who's ready to step into that kind of bracket and could have a really big influence on a team's attack as well. So I'm kind of waiting to hear a little bit around that. As we've discussed many times before, Leinster players are hard to get out of their home province. They're well coached there. They're in a winning team. They can get into an Ireland international squad without always being first choice for Leinster at times. And like, it's funny, Bert, you just mentioned an issue we talked about a year ago in terms of Munster and their recruitment. And it feels like everything else we talked about today is stuff we've touched on in the past and even at the start of the season. So yeah, the recruitment side of it is a massive part of it. I agree with you. That would be a massive thing for them, is to get a big, powerful hooker or tight head.
Kieran Frawley grew up a Munster fan, I think. One of their own. Watch that space. Just a word quickly, Murray, on Finn Wright. In that same piece you had on Morris, some talk, well, I say some talk, some reporting from yourself that this Australian front row might be on his way to Connacht.
Yeah, not a guy I know a lot about, to be honest. He's Irish qualified, plays both sides of the scrum, and he played Australian schoolboys. I think he's a nephew of Owen Finnegan, formerly of Leinster as well. And I think this is more maybe of a trial, even a development kind of player. Obviously, there's connections there to Australia with Friend and with David Nusafora. This IQ rugby thing is kind of grown, as we've seen. Don Morris is a good example of it. Sean Reffel is coming over to Ulster from Saracens as well, a guy we didn't even know was Irish qualified. And I just imagine that there's, actually I know for a fact that there's agents just getting in touch with the RFU, with the provinces now, having checked with their players to see if there's RFU qualifications. Obviously things are changing in England with a salary cap there being reduced, and squads are going to be squeezed. So I'd imagine there's going to be lots of contact from guys who have remembered that they've got an Irish granny or granddad.
Just a word on the other two provinces that we've barely given a word to so far, Bernard. I mean, you say that if this Munster-Ulster fixture goes ahead, as we hope it does, it's a massive game for Munster. Naturally enough, a massive game for Ulster as well. I think the last 6 between these two teams have been won by the home team. So statistically or historically, Ulster up against it. And yet, I think based on what we've seen of Munster and all we've discussed, it kind of feels like a 50-50. Could be an absolute cracker, actually, as it turns out, if it happens.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot more rounds to be played in the URC, but I think this game will be massive. Ulster have been on a really good run. They'll fancy their chances of coming down and getting a result. But I think it's all about Munster, to be honest. It's going to be so telling to see what they're made of in terms of how they react to this. But yeah, it could be, I believe all PCRs are clear so far, so at the moment it looks like it's on, and I'm looking forward to it. Actually, I think we'll find a lot about both teams, and Ulster are building, quite nicely. Obviously, they've responded so well to that poor performance in the Vive against Connacht, and just since then they've just built nicely without maybe getting too many highlights or talking points, but they're in a decent place, and I'm looking forward to seeing it.
They left off with a bit of momentum, didn't they, after Leinster and the Clermont games? And I'm just hoping that everyone is available and that we get to see McCluskey and Hume in midfield again, because I think they are just thrilling to watch at the moment. Particularly Hume. Like, McCluskey's been a totem, as we discussed on the last pod, Gav, and his new contract. Both their new contracts are brilliant news, but Hume is just accelerating so impressively, and he's such an integral part of Ulster's approach now. They're just putting him in good positions, like one-on-ones, even two-on-twos, and allow him to do his thing. And it's a wonderful use of a really effective outside centre. And again, if we're going to contrast, Chris Farrell, have Munster got the best out of him at all times? He doesn't get a lot of those one-on-one situations from what I can see. But Hume is obviously got this lightning quick footwork, really confident young man as well, and backs himself to beat defenders and make opportunities for Ulster, creating chances for others even in attack as well. Both of them are capable of distributing as well, and working hard on that side of his game is massive. defensively they teamed up really well also, and I think that'll be a brilliant battle if the pair of them are available.
Yeah, now Chris Farrell's a brave man signing a new contract. Just another couple of years of freezing his nads off in midfield. But we need to mention Leinster as well. And I don't know how to do it because we just haven't seen them in so long. But I wonder, Birch, like, as much as it is frustrating for them to have not played recently and for so long, will Leo Cullen and Stuart Lancaster be kind of like happy enough to just be working away in the background with nobody actually talking about them under no public pressure?
No, they would have had a plan around the fixture list as it originally stood, and obviously, you know, they had COVID in camp, so that they, you know, it was in their own hands to a certain extent, particularly the Montpellier game. But they were ready to play on Stephen's Day in Ulster. They're frustrated, but they're also very lucky in that they can have training sessions that are probably is better than some of the games they have to play, tougher. And I know they've had always 36 lads on the field and ready to go, you know, when they've been back in, when they shut down UCD for a little while, but since they've come back, they've always been able to have, you know, 2 15s plus extras on the field. So it won't be ideal, but they definitely won't be enjoying not playing. They'll want to be out there testing themselves, gathering points, and you know, getting ready for the big games that are in their radar, on the radar for the next couple of months. But yeah, I heard of one academy guy or young player who has been a close contact 5 times. So basically, he's had 10 days isolation without, from what I believe, hasn't had COVID. So you can just imagine how frustrating that is for some of the players who maybe are expecting to play a certain week, get that opportunity, and you know, then it's taken away from them. So stressful time for obviously everybody. But when you think of a young player, particularly who maybe is not equipped to deal with that or hasn't made a name for himself yet, and is just seeing these opportunities go, it's quite tough.
One of the things that Stephen Larkham actually mentioned recently in terms of Munster, they're quite hopeful now that since they've kind of been through a period where a lot of people in the squad had COVID, that they feel they might get a clean run at it now. And I think Leinster will have exactly the same hope. They've had this patch, literally a large proportion of the squad having COVID, and as you say, some of them not just close contacts, but they'll hope that they get a clean run at it now. And I think that's the case across everyone, really. Everyone's kind of been through it. Connacht have been quite blessed in terms of not being, you know, forced out any games themselves through their own COVID cases, but a lot of clubs have been through it, and fingers crossed that allows the calendar to run smoothly. The other thing with Leinster is all the injured guys, as Leo Cullen mentioned, have had a chance to fully recuperate. So we've got Johnny Sexton, Jack Conan, virtually everyone actually, apart from the longer term injuries, who's going to be coming back into it now. Everyone will obviously be rusty. They'll lack some of that cohesion that is so famously part of Leinster's approach, but they will hopefully get a clean start at it now into Europe with those 2 games, returning for those, and hopefully on into another big season, because they had a couple of underperformances so far this season. They've had a couple of disappointments. Even when they had players available, they probably didn't have that level of cohesion we associate with them always. So it's going to be a big 6 months ahead for them.
Looking ahead to the next 12 months then, I'll start with yourself, Murray. What are you most looking forward to about the rugby year?
There's loads, and obviously like there's some uncertainty, but I think there's loads to be optimistic about. I cannot wait for Super Rugby Pacific, particularly because Moana Pacifica and the Fijian Drua teams are going to be involved. It's going to be obviously local in the first number of rounds, but I'm fascinated to see how those sides do over this year and on into the future, and how that affects their national teams. Obviously, the Pacific Islands have massive potential to kind of take the next step and be competitive top tier nations. Really excited about that. The Japanese League One, the new competition as well. Unfortunately, the first game has come a cropper with COVID cases, but there's another array of kind of superstar players gone there. And again, it's all about that development of the top level of rugby. Hopefully Japanese rugby benefits massively from the growth of that league. And I know Japan are still working really hard to get into the rugby championship. Hopefully we see that in the near future, because they have earned a shot at, I think, at this stage. Those are the bits I'm really interested around. Obviously closer to home, the Six Nations is going to be absolutely brilliantly contested. There's this uncertainty around crowd restrictions, I know, at the moment. As far as I know, it'll be ploughing ahead on the dates as scheduled in the home venues. I know people have been talking about playing in one country. I don't think the Six Nations themselves have have discussed that really. And yeah, it's going to be really evenly contested because Ireland have had a great November. France, we know, are on a great trajectory. Wales have had recent success under Pivac, and Scotland have had a couple of big results last year, and you'd be shocked if England don't bounce back in a strong way. So it's actually quite difficult to call, and it's only around the corner now. So massive couple of weeks for Irish players in those European games in particular, presuming they go ahead to kind of prove their place and grab a kind of spot in Andy Farrell's squad. So loads from my point of view to look forward to.
That whets the appetite pretty nicely. Anything else, Birch, before we wrap?
Murray's nearly mentioned everything. I think there's a competition in the Aran Islands, Murray, that you might want to see if you can get a look at it. No, Leinster schools, because Murray mentioned everything else. I'm actually looking forward to seeing some schoolboy action, hopefully in February, March, and seeing the next generation.
First round of the cup is going to be good.
Yeah, first round of the cup, Blackrock, Michaels. Two favourites playing each other round one.
Those lads, a lot of them will have been waiting a long time for a bit of cup action, so that should be a cracking tournament as well. Across the 4 provinces, the Leinster one gets a lot of love, lads, but there are 3 more competitions as well in the country. Listen, pleasure as always. Birch, thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, lads.
Murray, thank you.
Cheers, Gav. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and happy New Year to everybody at home as well. Come here, thanks a million as always for tuning in. If you want to send questions to us for the next episode next Thursday, hit us up on email or Twitter or whatever, work away. If you want extra rugby pods, Murray gets together with Owen Toolan on Monday mornings, and they produce a brilliant little analysis piece. I mean, it's not even little, it's a mammoth every Monday looking back in the weekend's action. It's members.the42.ie if you want to sign up there. You also get access to all of the other offerings from the 42 membership. Most of them are available to peruse on the landing page. See what you think. It's a €5 a month or €42 for the year. We will catch you next week. Until then, have a great end of weekend. Mind yourselves and take it easy.